Welcome, everyone. We've just got several people still dialing in, so we're just going to give it a minute or two to allow all the participants who have registered to pop in using the link. So we'll get started in just a minute or two. Numbers are flowing in, so just another minute or so and we'll get started. Thanks for your patience. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this evening's event, which is the second in a series of 3 community forums on responding to a climate emergency. I'd just like to note that tonight's session is being recorded and will be shared. However, any personal information will be de-identified. To start, I'd just like to invite everyone to pause, maybe stop whatever else you may be doing if you're preparing dinner or anything else, and just be here as together we respectfully acknowledge our traditional owners of Port Phillip, the Yalukit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung. We extend our respects to their elders, both past and present and emerging, and acknowledge their continuing relationship to this land. Further, we would like to acknowledge that today marks the beginning of National Reconciliation Week, and that reconciliation is a journey for all Australians as individuals, families, communities, organisations, and importantly, as a nation. At the heart of this journey are relationships between the broader Australian community and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I would also like to acknowledge everyone here tonight as custodians of the planet, the place, and as well the space that we create together tonight. May we have a really great conversation together. My name is Donna Shield. I'm the coordinator of Waste Futures here at the City of Port Phillip. But tonight I am here as your facilitator. My role, therefore, is to guide you through tonight's agenda so that together we meet the purpose of our session and have that great conversation together. So what this could look like is me guiding people back on track and sticking with the questions and answers and having that conversation together. It'll look like me keeping us to time. The session's scheduled to run from 5 till 6:30 at the latest. And also it'll look like me and my colleagues here hearing and responding to your questions and answers as well and responses. And with that, the purpose of our session tonight is to seek suggestions about actions the community can take and the information and support that Council could provide to facilitate this action within the existing endorsed strategy framework that we have here at Port Phillip. As this is an interactive session, we will be asking you to participate in a couple of ways throughout the evening via polls and via the Q&A chat. I'm just going to take a second to invite you to locate these two functions to the right of your screen. So there should be a little Q&A box at the top with a little arrow. To access that, if you click the arrow, it should drop down and you'll be able to type in questions there or answers to our questions. And there's also a polling panel as well, same with a little arrow that you can click and it'll drop down and you can respond to the polls that we pose as well. So as a little bit of a warm up to using this functionality, we've got a quick poll set up for you to respond to. And the question we would like to ask is, did you attend our last climate emergency community forum, which was a couple of weeks ago? So there's just a minute there for you all to answer that question. "20 seconds just to pop your answers in. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the poll's now closed. Thank you all very much for popping in your answers to that. Looks like most of you were here in the session a couple of weeks ago, so 92%. And to those couple who were not, welcome to the space. And to everyone else, welcome back. It's great to have you all here this evening. Onto the next section. So let's just get into some housekeeping. This series of sessions has been developed with input from the Port Phillip Emergency Climate Action Network, known as PCAN, and thanks to Jack Halliday, Rhonda Small, Judy Gunson and Peter Moriartis for your contribution to the planning and suggested content for tonight's session. This is the second session in the series of 3 events, and 2 weeks ago we set the scene with a lot of information about Council's actions and the formal strategies and plans that define those actions. And we thank everyone who joined us, asked questions and participated in that session. What you can expect tonight then is a conversation with our panel of folks from PCAN who, as community representatives, will be sharing information and ideas with you. And we'll also be asking you to think about your actions and make suggestions about what support you would need to take further action on climate change in our community. At the end of the evening, we expect to have a whole lot of feedback from you all, which will go towards informing our final session on how Council can support and facilitate our community with these suggested actions. As I've mentioned, we will be asking you all a few specific questions and running a few polls throughout the evening. However, you may find that you have other questions that you would like answered, which we absolutely welcome and encourage as well. So a couple of common questions which we found in our first session were about Council spending and changes to Council's current strategies and policies. If you have a question this evening that relates to either of these topics, I would like to recognise up front that these are really important questions and things to raise, and that we hear you, and that the best forum for you to pose these questions and provide feedback on these issues is via contributing to our council plan and budget submission process, which is due to open on the 17th of June. And in a follow-up email to this session, we'll be able to provide some information on how to access that when that date comes up. And also encourage you to sign up to our Have Your Say page as well, where you can get updates on upcoming consultations that directly relate to council policies, plans and strategies and whatnot. And we also invite other queries that may not relate to those things. So if you're looking for specific advice or support for your home or business, you can email us at enviro@portphillip.vic.gov.au. And finally on that, in the first session, we had about 130 people submitting hundreds of questions that we then consolidated into 85 key questions and themes. And answers to those questions have now been published on the Sustainable Port Phillip website. So we encourage you to check these out too. There's a range of information as well as answers to those questions on that website relating to sustainability in our municipality and our community. So head on over there and check that out when you get some time. So to keep us all safe and connected this evening, as we have this conversation together, we do have some house rules. A link to these were sent to all registrants earlier in the week, but I would like to reiterate a few key ones. Please don't publish any personal information, and we will be moderating that anyway, so hopefully none will slip through. Please no abuse or trolling, and please no deliberate disruption. And anyone that violates these rules will be removed from the conversation. So as I just mentioned, our conversation this evening is being moderated by the amazing sustainability programs team, who are also put this event together and are working tirelessly behind the scenes on all the tech, which is great to bring this to you all. So when you do pop a question in the Q&A panel or respond to the questions we pose to you in our Q&A sections, these will be responded to by one of our team and then published for the rest of the group here tonight to see. When you are writing your comments, please make sure you address your comments to all participants and click send, not send privately. And that way we'll be able to receive those and respond to them. And now let's talk about climate emergency. As we outlined and explained in our last session a couple of weeks ago, our most recent data estimates that our community, which also includes businesses, generates over 2 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2017. In that first session, we shared lots of information about council's own sustainability actions, but we estimate that council's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is less than 1% of the total. The most significant contribution to our municipality's emissions is the energy use from our homes and businesses, and the chart on screen now describes that in graphic form. The data shows that energy use in the community is what we really need to work on if we're going to have any meaningful impact on our emissions, and this requires commitment from community also to take action. Based on this data, our first Q&A question, which I'd like to pose to you all tonight, is what actions are you taking to reduce your emissions and prepare for climate change? So right now, I invite you all to use that Q&A function on your screen to type in the things that you're doing and share these with your neighbours and your community, so that we can have a look and see what's going on out there at the moment and what you're doing. So I'm just going to give you a minute or two to type in some responses and share them with your community. So what actions are you taking to reduce your emissions and prepare for climate emergency, or prepare for climate change, I should say. And just to remember to address the comments to all panelists, clicking send, not send privately. Cool, so we've got lots of responses coming in already. Thank you, everyone. We've got people who have solar panels installed, a few people with solar panels, buying less and recycling more, buying renewable electricity, great. Learning to grow own food, excellent. I am attempting that myself at the moment with some success. Use of public transport, great. Yet before COVID, of course, this presents some more challenges for us at the moment with health and safety being, I guess, a front of people's minds more so at the moment. Lots of solar panels, great. Not using a car, purchase of 100% green electricity, yeah, excellent. That's a really great one people can get involved in fairly simply and quickly, subscribing to an accredited green power. Ooh, stopping flying, great one. Yep. Emissions from the airline industry are certainly a big contributor to emissions. Lots of reducing vehicle use, solar panels, getting rid of cars, advocating for safe bike lanes, great. Purchasing LED lighting, that's popped up a few times too. Ooh, double glazing in some rooms, excellent. Ooh, conversion to vegetarianism, nice one. I'll advocate for that too. These are great. So many. I'm like having trouble reading them all out. I'm just going to scroll and maybe read a few more out. Increasing insulation and draft proofing, awesome. Yep. Off gas altogether, great. And using solar power. Ooh, wearing extra layers of clothes instead of heating, nice one. Buying local. Joining climate change activism groups, great. So many things. Oh, so good. Awesome. All right. I'm going to stop reading those out now. I could spend a lot of time doing that. Thank you all for jumping in and popping your responses in there. They are awesome. At the end of this, we're going to package all those up, de-identified, of course, and share them as a list on our website for people to have another read through and have a look at in a collated way, and maybe inspire you to pick a couple more of things that you may have not have done yet, or maybe you could share them with friends or neighbours or other people in your life as well who might need some ideas on things and ways to act. All right. I am going to hand over now to Lisa Patton, who is the coordinator of sustainability programs, who's going to introduce our next section and our PCAN representatives.
Thanks, Donna, and hello, everybody. It's exciting to see so many people logged in once again to talk about climate change and the climate emergency. As we're finding as we work through our online provision of information, it's really difficult to coordinate hearing all of your voices over an online platform. So what we've done is we've invited some representatives from PCAN to provide us with some suggestions about actions that community members can take. So consider them your voices today. When we read the comments from the last session and the follow-up survey, there were two topics that participants most wanted to hear about. Firstly, a lot of you were interested in accessing renewable energy, particularly in those instances where you can't necessarily install a rooftop solar panel. Secondly, community members were interested in what they could do to increase greening and manage water so that they could be better prepared for a changing climate. Due to the popularity of these topics, we thought we would discuss them in more detail. So I would like to introduce Jack Halliday, Rhonda Small and April Seymour to provide some suggestions on behalf of the community. Okay, so Jack, I'd like to suggest that you unmute your microphone. great. It's good to have you here. Now, as a member of the Port Phillip Alliance for Sustainability, which is one of the groups that are part of PCAN, I know that you talk to a lot of community members about the topic of renewable energy, energy reduction, and some different things that community members might be interested in doing. So perhaps you could share some of those suggestions with us now.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So talking about emission reductions that you can do yourself, I'll try and start with the things you can do more practically at home, and then work up to some of the larger scale kinds of projects that you may be interested in joining or even help form. And it's important, I think, to realise in starting that 2/3 of the 2 million or so tonnes of emissions in Port Phillip come from electricity. So that is where we must target the work that we're doing. First of all, if we think about home improvements, Belinda's mentioned most of those already, but I'll just quickly restate them. Draft proofing, adding to your insulation, double glazing. Degassing is very important. When your old stove is getting tired, it's important to replace it with an electric one rather than gas. And most importantly of all, it's necessary to, if you're serious about this, to purchase only green power from your electricity retailer. I should mention state government subsidies. They can help with solar PV, with solar hot water services, and electric heat pumps, which are not quite as familiar to many people, but they're terrific for your hot water service, or for if you have hydronic heating at home, they can manage that as well. Moving away from what you can do directly in your own home to think about power sharing. For the many apartment dwellers in Port Phillip, we know that probably 60% of residents here are apartment dwellers. A company named Loom has developed a world-first system which enables a single rooftop solar system to be shared between multiple apartments or businesses within the same building. It's a fantastic, fairly recent system, and it's something that people who live in a smaller apartment, not a tower one necessarily, which doesn't have sufficient roof space to the number of apartments, but in smaller apartments and medium-sized apartments, that could be a manageable way for you to do your bit in terms of purchasing renewable electricity. Then there are some more complex systems which involve sharing power between individual residents. Community microgrids are the first ones to talk about. These are power sharing arrangements between households. They're dependent on having batteries with your solar across most of the participants in the system. Most of these projects are concentrated in regional communities, and one that you may have heard of is the Yakandanda project. Yakandanda is a town of about 1,400 people, and in 2014 it set itself a target of becoming 100% renewable electricity by 2022. They now have 3 community microgrids operating. Coming onto the market more recently are what are called virtual power plants. These are smart solar systems which generate solar from your rooftop, and of course they're provided through a supplier who will guarantee your pricing and will lower your electricity bills. At times of high grid demand, members of the VPP, as they're called, can pool their battery resources and support the grid operator, which, as we all know from recent blackouts from time to time, if these were in more widespread use, would be very useful to all of us. when members do join and support the grid on those occasions, they receive usually a pretty worthwhile reward in the form of a power credit from the operator. And in South Australia, one such virtual power plant, which has been sponsored by the South Australian government with a target of 50,000 households and using just Tesla batteries, is now over 1,000 households. And I'm not sure what their target date for the 50,000 households is, but it's only been introduced in the last 12 months. And finally, there is the collective purchase of offsite renewables. These are also known as power purchase agreements. Simply stated, residents can either join or help start a power purchase agreement where the members contract to buy renewable power from a developer building a new solar or wind farm at guaranteed prices. Larger in scale than that model, primarily for residents, are the power purchase agreements which have been taken up by larger electricity consumers, usually commercial or industrial users. And there are many such power purchase agreements now in operation in Australia. Most of them have come from corporate users to this stage, but they're being increasingly looked at by residential groups. So I think that's probably baffling enough for me, certainly, and for lots of you as well, in terms of where we see ourselves fitting into that framework. But I think that there are some projects there which look quite attractive from here in Port Phillip. Thank you.
You know what, Jack? I think in a couple of short minutes, you took us through quite a good, detailed and yet not too complicated journey from the beginning of some of those simple things that people can do and take action on now around their own home. And then, going through to the more complex collective solutions. And I think that's something that we get asked quite a lot at council around, I guess, that jump from the small things that I can do myself in my own home to something that might have a more significant impact as a group. Do you have any particular advice for community members that might be wanting to look into particularly those two bottom dot points, the power sharing or the collective purchase options?
Well, of the environmental groups in Port Phillip, I don't think any, I think we're talking about those projects, the possibility of those projects at present. And if people have an interest in those, generally, it would be good to make contact with PCAN or members of the network like LIV or Port Phillip Alliance for Sustainability. And I think Lisa, you're able to put people into contact with them after the meeting if they wish to follow that up. Because we would certainly be interested in talking with people and helping them get to a suitable ending, hopefully.
You've done the beautiful segue into what we were going to do next. I'll just check, Donna, did you feel like there was any other questions we'd like to ask Jack, or should we move on to the first poll?
I don't, but I was just going to say a comment. I learnt just then about virtual power plants, which I didn't even know that was a thing. So thank you for opening my eyes to something new, Jack. Yeah. That's really interesting, and I'm going to look into that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes, and definitely I think this is part of our conversation tonight as council officers and the community around, the actions that you might like to take, but we're also interested in how we can work together and support you in taking those actions. So I guess to help us get a sense of the interest, we're going to open up a poll. There were kind of 4 clear types of suggestions there that Jack had suggested. If you just give us a minute, a poll will pop up on your screen in the top right-hand corner. Here we go. So those suggestions that Jack has mentioned, I'd really be interested to know of our audience tonight, which of those you'd be most interested in taking action. What would you like to, look into more? We'll give you a minute to have a think about it. And then, yes, we'd be really interested in testing interest. So please let us know.
About 15 more seconds to pop your answer in the poll. Five seconds. It's like Eurovision voting.
I was thinking it was like a bomb going off, actually. I don't know.
Polling is closed. Just wait for those answers to come up.
Oh, that's quite interesting that there's a real even spread across those items. What I didn't mention, and I apologise, for those of you that have selected other, if you wanted to put something into that Q&A section about the other, if there was anything else that you're interested in, so we can capture that tonight, please do that. This is really interesting, and I think it goes to that combination, I think, of what you can do on a smaller scale in your own home and also what you can do collectively. And for a lot of us, we do both those things. So, there's a lot there that's quite interesting. Jack, do those results surprise you?
I think the interest in collective purchasing is quite welcome, really, because as we all know, developing that sort of arrangement in highly urbanised and dense areas is much harder. So it is gratifying to see that number of people thinking that it's something they would be interested in following.
Yeah, and certainly I think our residents do tell us, and as council officers we do hear this, that living in rental accommodation or living in high density can often feel like a real barrier to taking action. And some of these options are ones that you can participate in even if you don't own your home or what kind of home you live in. Or as you also pointed out, Jack, business. And this is a space here where the commercial, industrial, non-residential sectors can really get involved in. So this kind of, I guess, brings us to our second question to the participants, because we're here as council officers to listen to what you think. Keeping these kind of actions in mind, what is it that you think you need to help you either take these actions personally or to support others in your community to take these actions? So I'd really like you to go back to that Q&A section and just in a couple of words, if you'd like to pop in some ideas there for us around what support you would need to take any of these actions and any suggestions you have around that. And we'll just take a couple of minutes to go through some of those ideas from the group. There's a few suggestions coming through for advice, support, guidance, videos, which is all really good. Need to be governed as a policy and procedure. Right, so there's a role there, I think, for council in pulling it together. Information. Yeah, I think a lot of this is around that complexity of power sharing and collective purchase of offsite renewables that as you said, Jack, it's complicated. And a big part of that is probably information and support and guidance is a lot of what I'm seeing coming through. Donna, have you got anything that you're seeing coming through?
Yeah, the videos and also resources for renters to take to owners corporations, body corporations to influence buildings in that regard as well. Yep. And coordination was another one that I've seen pop up in a few different for a few different topics, but how we may be able to coordinate action as well.
Yeah. That's all looking good. Right. Gosh, you're slamming them through, everyone.
Yeah, there's so many. I'm struggling to keep up.
No, this is really good. I think it actually demonstrates that there's a real interest in this space, which is what we thought from the survey results and previously, that that desire to access renewable energy, that isn't always, the answer isn't always a solar panel on the roof. So this is fantastic. What we might do, these are going to keep flicking through and we will, refer back to them, but we might move on just to the next topic to keep things moving. It's not to say we're not continuing to monitor what's coming through, we'll bring it up further in conversation. So what I would like to do is now introduce again a couple of our panelists, Rhonda Small and April Seymour, who are here to talk to us about greening and water. I think there was certainly a huge amount of interest in these topics around preparing for a changing climate and what we can do as a community, actions we can take for ourselves, potentially collectively. And as we kind of went through the topics, greening and water are so tied together, which is why we're addressing them together. And I'd like to kind of comment before I hand over firstly to April to talk through some of the actions, that this is a topic that we know a lot of people feel really passionate about in the community. So we're really kind of interested to see where are the areas where council can support you to take your own actions. So April, I might throw to you if that's okay.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm really glad that you said in the context of emissions reduction, the concept of individual action as well as collective action, because we know that working at all scales is the only way that we're going to be able to get the acceleration and the amount of action that we need in a climate emergency, as has been declared in City of Port Phillip. I'm a resident of Port Phillip and also a staff person and a volunteer at the Eco Centre, so you may know me through those contexts. And we do a range of activities around what we might call green and blue infrastructure, so greening and water in cities, in urban and suburban environments. And that's all about plants and water in a variety of forms, and they have benefits around climate, but a whole range of co-benefits too. Not just cooling the city and reducing the temperatures by reducing hard surfaces and sinking carbon emissions, but you'll also have physical and mental health benefits in a greener city. We know that there's biodiversity benefits, and there's lots of passion for that in our local community. And also aesthetically, it can make quite a beautiful city as well for all of us to live in. And at the Eco Centre, our projects partner with all sorts of individuals and groups, businesses and institutions. So we know that the public and private realm are really connected. They're functionally connected. Just as ecosystems or animals or floods or droughts don't follow municipal boundaries or property titles, so to do the needs and the benefits of greening and water, if we do it in an integrated way for the maximum benefit in our own homes, properties, and neighborhoods. So I'm going to speak a little bit about rain tanks and rain gardens, about de-paving your property, and about community greening shared spaces together, and a few different aspects of how you can get involved in if you're keen to participate in these ways. And Rhonda's going to also share some related projects and opportunities.
And April, sorry to interrupt, but I do need to make an apology and a clarification for the audience. Rhonda, April and I were working on this slide only just a few minutes before we went live. And I want to clarify that the last dot point that Rhonda's going to speak to is joining a relevant local community group to bring about larger actions, not local actions. So apologies, Rhonda, and we'll make sure that we'll make that clear, that yes, it's the nature of pulling this together at the last minute. So please bear with us, everybody. It is about bigger actions, that last dot point. April, I'm sorry to have interrupted your flow. Please
That's
go
all
back
right.
to where you were at.
Local to planet Earth. Again, reiterating that all of
Mhm.
these scales are really interconnected and the actions have to be happening by all of us at the same time. So for rain tanks and rain gardens, what do I mean by rain tanks and rain gardens? Rain tanks for more than irrigation. So lots of us have rain tanks that we got with great rebates during the millennium drought. We have found that a lot of them are unplumbed or inactive or only being used for irrigation. When there's a large flood event, or when there's a drought, even for that matter, rain tanks can only do their work if they can fill up with water for that water to be used in multiple ways by your household. So you can save drinking water for drinking by using rainwater for flushing your toilets and washing laundry. This is often a very affordable adaptation that can be made at the scale, whether it's for a few $1,000s of plumbing at your home or up to $20,000. We've worked with schools to convert 40 toilets all to rainwater and save the drinking water for drinking in a climate where we know that there's going to be intense storm events and also long periods of drought. You can see that this has benefits both for the environment and for our own water needs in home and domestic and business use. It'll also help slow the flow. So when we get these downpours or floods, having rain tanks or rain gardens, which are typically excavated areas, so it's a deeper garden than might normally be existing. You get the same surface planting area, but you have a whole lot of sand and gravel underneath that will help hold more water like a sponge, slowly release it as filtered water out into the natural system, and also keep that garden looking lush. This is something that you need to have lots of them for it to work at scale. So the more of us who can commit to this sort of landscape change, the better. You can see one of these modeled in the front garden of the Eco Centre in the St Kilda Botanic Gardens, as well as a number of them in city streets throughout Port Phillip. And this is really about considering the whole movement of water. So the whole water cycle, its source, where did it come from before it got to the way that you are using it in your home or business, but also where it goes to afterwards. And so thinking about both the freshwater uses and the stormwater or rainwater that flows out into our landscape, into our streets, into our drains. There's 3,000 drains that just lead right out to the bay and the beaches, bringing any pollutants along with it. So by making these choices, we can help with climate change mitigation, but also a whole range of co-benefits for a cleaner, healthier city as well. And the second thing that I'd like to speak to briefly is about de-paving your property. So there are actually permeability targets. If there's a new development, we need to have landscape that water can drain into, that rain can be used where it lands. It can feed your gardens and keep the trees and streetscapes looking lush. It won't rush or flood, or especially not into your neighbors' houses. We have zones of Port Phillip where that's a quite significant problem. And so one of the best ways that we can work on that is unpaving our ground, unsealing the soil. And that could be removing a patio, having a permeable driveway. A lot of the things that are controlled by planning at new properties aren't overseen on our private properties. So that means that I see a lot of accidental paving over of lawns that people might not have had a conversation to understand that has a whole range of literal flow-on impacts. And it also adds to hard surfaces in cities, which compounds heating when we know we have these intense hot summers. Again, you can get lots of co-benefits by landscaping whatever you've de-paved. And greening is a carbon sink. It can also provide habitat and beautification of your landscape. Community greening and shared spaces is the last thing that I wanted to speak to. And that is, shared spaces could be a part of your car park that's underutilized if you're in a shared block that you might de-pave and plant out, or a neglected area that you could get together with neighbors and install plants. It might be your nature strip. There's a beautiful green roof, very famously, on Westbury Street in East St Kilda, but we also have amazing parks and open spaces, some with opportunities to do co-plantings with groups like the Eco Centre, Elstramick Park Association in the beautiful new Elstramick Park Nature Reserve Friends of Westgate Park, and citywide through City of Port Phillip also has national tree planting opportunities for those of us who might not have a property on which we can plant ourselves in the city. But as with everything, the scale is important. There has to be a lot of it, and with limited time to make big impact, we want to be really strategic in the placement of where and what we're planting in these community greening and all the green and blue infrastructure for that matter.
And I guess similar to Jack, the way that you've worked through the dot points here is we're starting with some of those smaller scale things we can all do that hopefully add up, but also going to that kind of community connection of things that we can do as a collective. Which is really good. I'll have some more questions for you, but I might bring Rhonda in now just to talk to the last dot point, if that's okay. Rhonda, you'll have to click unmute on your screen. And I will just add that in terms of speaking as a community member and discussing issues of interest to joining local community groups, I'm going to have to say the spiel, everyone, that of course this conversation is very much the views of the panelists and not necessarily of the City of Port Phillip, but we're really interested in having this conversation with you about actions that people might like to take in relation to joining and becoming a collective voice with other community groups. So Rhonda, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. So I'm Rhonda Small and I'm a member of PCAN representing the Community Alliance of Port Phillip. And I wanted to start actually not with any criticism of council, but in fact with a shout out to council for the wonderful work that they've done in Alma Park with the stormwater harvesting project there. And that's doing a huge amount to stop the use of drinking water for the watering of our parks. It's also keeping Alma Park in a really lush state. So these are the sorts of things that are happening locally that we'd really like to see more of as a community. And I guess the reason for having this final dot point here is to say that as a community, we can take individual actions. We can take up some of the opportunities that both Jack and April have talked about. And we can also get involved with our neighbours. And I just wanted to give a little sort of stormwater example of that I live near Fitzroy Street, and a number of locals who live in the neighbourhood around there have been really keen to think about other ideas for stormwater harvesting. And, you know, we live in a part of St Kilda where there's a runoff that goes down a hill. So the top of St Kilda Hill down to the Catani Gardens. Catani Gardens is a place where we walk all the time and along the foreshore, and all this water, you know, just rolls out into the bay. So, you know, we've just got together in a little group called St Kilda Water and Trees and started to talk about, you know, the ways that we can, you know, see some more projects happening in our local community. So we talk to our local councillors, we'll talk to other people who are interested in these ideas. And these are the kinds of things as a community that we can all, in very local ways, in our own little neighbourhoods, start to talk to each other about things we might want to participate in. And that advocacy, right from the very local level up to advocating for responses to climate action at state government level, at federal government level. These are really important things to be doing. So that's really all I wanted to say, but I think it's important to keep those kinds of, you know, local activism is a really fantastic way for community building.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Rhonda. And I know that, you know, in the conversations we've had and that the conversations we have in council and with other levels of government and with community groups is, you know, greening and water doesn't necessarily understand where a municipal boundary ends or where the property line is between public and private realm. And sometimes some of these bigger things can seem a little overwhelming, but if people are looking for action that they can take and are really interested in joining a local community group, you can work together to bring about, you know, bigger actions.
That's right.
It's pretty exciting. I wonder if, Donna, did you have any questions for the panelists specifically around that content, or should we go to the poll and see what comes out next?
Nothing specific, but I have been keeping an eye on the Q&A on the right that's coming through, and I just wanted to draw people's attention to City of Port Phillip's nature strip guidelines. So there's been a few questions about planting out nature strips and whatnot, and we can do that. Community members can do that. There's just a few rules around it to make sure that we protect utilities under there. So things like dialing before you dig, so that you're not digging up potential water pipes or gas or any other services, telco, and making sure that things like bins and vehicles and whatnot can still have safe and accessible egress as well. So I'd encourage people to check out the nature strip guidelines on council's website, and perhaps we could send a link to that to the group afterwards as well. So yes, planting out nature strips is something we can do. Cool.
Okay. So well, maybe why don't we turn to the poll so we can get a sense from the audience of these 4 topics. You'll probably notice a theme here, everyone. So again, this is a little bit around the specific things that you can do yourself around your own home, also looking at participating in community greening projects, or that option of being part of a larger collective. We'll give you a minute to choose your selection, and then we'll continue having a conversation. Okay, I think that's the end of the poll. So let's see what the results are once they come through. Oh, wow, a really strong vote for community greening there, which is great, and also being part of a larger group. Similarly, that one person that selected other, please pop in the Q&A your other so we can see it, and the rest of the group can as well. I think, I don't think it's that surprising that those larger scale kind of activities are of interest to our audience, and particularly, having looked at all of the individual actions a lot of you are taking in that first question, perhaps for some of you, you're already on board with some of these individual actions. April, were you surprised at all by those results, or anything you would say?
I'm very interested, although a lot of people do have rain tanks. I'm interested how many of them are multi-purpose rain tanks. Yeah, so I'd have more questions with the group. We have a strong community interest in shared greening, and we know that not only does it have all of the climate benefits, but there's a lot of social benefits that as well. That's something that Eco Centre is certainly willing and helping to facilitate and connect people to, and we'd love to work together with various landowners, whether it's council or private landowners, to do more of those shared greening, greening of shared spaces across our municipality.
So, I mean, we will, we'll ask a little bit more of our participants in the next few minutes, but considering that community greening is one of their key things that they're interested in, do you have any kind of first advice of, what to do first, or what's the, it's a broad topic, so maybe that's a broad question, but, what should people do next if that's the topic that they're interested in knowing more about or taking action on?
In a non-COVID year, we would be coming up to the prime planting season. As we're not, I would encourage you to become a member of groups like Elstrom Park Association, Eco Centre, various Pecan membership organizations that have planting plans or community events for planting. But additionally, because Friends of type groups tend to be focused on public spaces and open spaces, also to have a look, on your exercise walk tomorrow, look at your block, look at your yard, look at your driveway, and identify what might be plantable or de-pavable and greenable in there. That's a shared area. I do believe the shared spaces is multiple categories that are all connected, and there's a big group network of biolinks, people who are interested in biolinks or creating these green and blue corridors and noticing how they are threads through our different neighborhoods and can be maximized to have all the different sorts of climate and other benefits that are possible. So join a relevant local group. It's a circular answer.
Yeah. And actually, I was going to bring Rhonda in there. Rhonda, if you just take your microphone off mute. That was the the second most popular option. And also looking at some of the comments coming in, perhaps this audience tonight, a lot of people are already part of local community groups. That's partly probably what brought them to this evening. So I guess I have a two-part question. For the group today, what should be their next step if they're interested in joining a relevant local group? And then if we're thinking of the wider audience, the people that aren't here today, but the other 110,000 people that live in the City of Port Phillip, what do you think is a good way to get that message out to the wider group, wider community?
Okay. Well, the first part of the question, I think, obviously, as you said before, you're going to share a list of relevant local community groups. So the member groups of PCAN. PCAN's a network, but there are member groups and other relevant local groups that people can learn about to join. The really bigger question, though, of how do we reach out to people who are not currently involved in local organisations, I think the example I gave is one way to do that. I mean, some of us involved in that little group haven't been involved in a local community group in Port Phillip before. It's so reaching out to your neighbours about a local issue that's important to all of you can help start that sense of collective action and build up the experience of what it's like to get a bit involved, engaged in your local community around an issue that you're interested in. So if there are people who want to join a group and can't find one, well, perhaps it's because the issues they're interested in are perhaps more local, or they'd like to start a new group. There's no problem about doing that either.
That makes a lot of sense. Before we do go to the next question, I guess I'll just return once more to you, April. Greening and water, it's so big. And I just wanted to pick up on your comment about rainwater tanks, not just for irrigation, and that kind of idea that for a lot of people, they think of the drought, they think of drinking water. They're not necessarily thinking of it as another tool to manage floodwater and unexpected too much water. Anything more you'd want to say on that, or anything you think that could be helpful to put that argument forward more strongly, that that's a good tool?
I want to live in a beautiful city, but if you're only using your rain tank for irrigation, it's fairly superficial. Even when we think about the serious droughts that we know are ahead and the serious floods that residents have already faced, I think it's how cool is it that you can have something that will save you money, help with climate, and be neighborly at the same time. I also think that it's within the budgets of body corporates and blocks, as well as homeowners, schools, businesses. Although I recognize that many tenants will have to negotiate with their landlords in order to do that. The Eco Centre has a lot of experience in helping different scales of individuals, businesses, community centres, schools put these in place. We'd be happy to talk to you more about those opportunities. I would very strongly encourage them. And I guess I'd also just add on to your question to Rhonda and her response. It's a very interesting moment, although there's economic strain at low levels of government. There are also initiatives like Work for Victoria and stimulus packages that could be a significant opportunity to have more support flowing to a municipality and a local government like yours, like ours, where there's community interest in this. I'd be so excited if we could find ways to put resourcing behind these initiatives so that they really are a true marriage between public and private realm initiatives.
All right, thank you. Donna, if that's okay with you, we might go to the next question to the audience. So, having listened to that conversation and looked at what the polling is, our next question to the audience is really, what is it that you would need to help you take this action of any of these four? And I mean, even if perhaps you chose one in the poll but are interested in more than one, we're interested in your feedback and input. So we'll leave it just a minute to let you pop some suggestions in the Q&A. I'll also just note that we're mostly focusing on publishing those comments related to this specific question, but we are keeping track of anything else that's coming through. So any other suggestions are not being lost. We're just managing a lot coming through, so we're focusing on the answers to the questions as they're coming in. So yes, a few words about what would help you take some of these actions, and maybe even just a little bit broader, since that's where the conversation went. In terms of not just you yourself, but your neighbours and the businesses that you shop at and the other connections you have in the City of Port Phillip. What do you think are the kind of things that would support these actions? The nature strips remain a hot topic for people. Apologies, we've not actually posed a question in the poll for those of you that are looking. It's just actually a few words that you can pop in that Q&A section yourself. Oh, there's some long answers to read through. Okay, we've had some questions around which community groups already exist in particular areas. We'll certainly, as Rhonda mentioned, send out to all participants links to the community groups that council are aware of. We've got quite a long list. And also, I think that comment from Rhonda, maybe there isn't one in your local area in the topic that interests you, but could be an opportunity for you to start your own group. Are you seeing anything else coming through yet, Donna?
Several things about growing food and looking for assistance in how to and if people can dig up like footpaths or nature strips to do that kind of planting in. So I think maybe that's another area of council, but an area that we can potentially look into get more information and guidance out there to the community on as well, because that's a really interesting one to me as far as community greening goes.
Some interesting things that are coming through and filtering through from behind the scenes is there's a interesting disagreement is too strong a word. There's some contrary suggestions. Some people are calling for more advice and support and information. Others are saying we don't need any more advice and support and information. There's heaps of that out there. We want practical support, which I think is quite interesting. And maybe that speaks to, for some people, advice and information is the piece that's missing. Give me a list and I can follow it. Whereas for others, it's more around different types of support, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, look, I think maybe there is no kind of one size fits all approach in this either, and that there's going to be different things that are going to work for different people as well. And there might be some areas where some people are okay, they've got the advice, they're ready to act, but it might not be the same on a different topic. So a bit of a mix.
That is a real mix coming through. It's interesting. I guess April and Rhonda, as our panelists on this topic, some of those things that weigh up between is it about information or something else? Did you have any kind of comments on that?
I have two thoughts, Lisa. One is even if there's a new local group to be made with your neighbours, I would say don't feel like you have to be intimidated or reinvent the wheel. Talk to Rhonda, talk to there's a balaclava environment and street trees. There are other groups that are providing models of how you can do this. And so similarly with something like de-paving, for greening in open spaces and installing rain tanks, you do actually have to have a plumber involved because you are connecting up to the infrastructure of the city ultimately to change the way water is moving through it. De-paving your property, you have a little bit more freedom. And I'm wondering if for some people who might like to learn by experience rather than case study, there might even be opportunity for something in the permablitz model style, where you contribute to the transformation of another neighbor's property and learn the skills through that. And then those people come and volunteer to help on the similar transformation on your own property. Not just for this, maybe for even some of the energy retrofitting or things like that. It would feel very active and informational at the same time. So I'm interested in the listeners' thoughts on that.
That is interesting. Certainly, wow. I mean, as the comments are coming in thick and fast, we knew this was a topic that people felt passion for. So it's good to have it coming through. I will also, I guess, I want to keep reassuring the participants that, if your question is veering off into something slightly different, and we might not necessarily be addressing it tonight, we are still capturing that information. So I know some of you might be getting a bit of a cut and paste response just to help us keep moving, but please don't think that doesn't mean we're not paying attention to your suggestions. It's so we can kind of keep guiding this conversation right now around greening and water and actions that community members can take. Donna, was there anything else you wanted to put in at this point, or would you like to move on to the next stage?
I feel like that's been quite captured. The comments seem to be slowing down now on that particular topic as well. So I'm thinking we've been going for just over an hour, and it might be time for a 10-minute break to just rest your eyes from the screen for a minute or two, maybe make a cuppa and come back. Thank you, obviously, everyone so far for all your comments and feedback. Just the invitation now to take a 10-minute break, stretch your legs a little bit, and maybe have a think about other actions that you might like to take and how council could help you take those actions, because we'll be looking at those two questions after our break. So if everyone would like to be back by 6:17, that's 10 minutes, we'll get started again then and continue our conversation.
And thank you very much to our panelists.
And we are back. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Just to respond to one of the questions that came through while we were on break. Unfortunately, no, there will not be any fruit bread delivered to people's doors as a part of this session. I thought that was quite a funny comment. And we'll say that's because of COVID, not because we haven't prepared snacks for you all. All right, so let's get back into it. We've got a couple more questions before we wrap up tonight's session. Firstly, thanks again to April, Jack and Rhonda and Lisa for moderating that session before the break. There was some really interesting discussion and some really interesting ideas and questions that came through as well as part of that. Bike paths was definitely one that came up a lot, and we can address that further as well. Perhaps at another session, perhaps if you've got specific questions, emailing that enviro@portphillip.vic.gov.au email address as well for more conversation around that. So we've heard several ideas and potential actions, and I guess I'd just like to pose another question to you all. Other than those actions that we've spoken about today in relation to greening and water and renewable energy, etc., are there any other ideas or actions that you would like to take to help you prepare for climate change? So things that we may not have mentioned already that you'd like to talk about tonight and pop in the Q&A box. So the invitation there just for the next minute or so to pop in any responses to that question that's up on your screen at the moment. And we'll see what comes through there. Cool. Cool. So more greening of council and shared spaces with food, yep, and nitrogen fixes, cool. Improving public transport links, yeah, great. Electric vehicles and more info about charging stations, yep, great one, thank you. A few coming through around food planting, fruit trees, etc. Cool. Looking at consumption and lowering consumption. Yep, great one. I'm happy to have conversations about that too, being one of the waste people during the day at council. Definitely an important one. Talk with airline for green pioneering. That's an interesting one and something for whoever to put that in. I'd love to know more about that. That's a new term for me. So I'm interested to, if you want to pop something more in about that. Home improvements using passive design. Yep, great one. So things that we can do to engineer our homes, new homes better, or even retrofit as well. Yep. Definitely greening. Definitely publishing, more publication of the climate emergency. So many things coming through. Heaps coming through, and I'm getting mindful of time now as well. So I might just pop into, thank you everyone for those responses. They're amazing. And of course, we're going to summarise all of those as well and have a good look at them over the next couple of weeks as we plan our third session as well. Can definitely see some really great ideas here that we may be able to shape into programs to deliver for community in the coming year. I want to jump to our last question, or our last kind of Q&A question for you all tonight. Thinking about those ideas that you've been just popping in the Q&A chat on the right just now, just wanting to know if there's anything council can do to help you take those actions. So thinking about, those comments that you just put in, like cooling or passive homes or food production in the local area, etc. How do you feel council may be able to help you to take those actions? And I will keep scrolling down. They're coming through so fast. So apologies if I don't get to read out your specific comment. We're definitely seeing them all, and we're definitely recording them all to read through thoroughly after the session in the coming week or two. Cool. Bulk food purchasing. Yeah, great. There's a couple of stores in Port Phillip that offer those kinds of things. That's awesome. Yep. Continuing conversations with community. Yep, for sure. Electric vehicles is another theme that is coming up a fair bit too. Reducing paved space as well. Yep, hearing that from a few comments coming through as well. Increasing canopy cover, tree cover, and more community planting initiatives. Yep, hearing that one coming through as well. Cool. Ooh, so many. And just improved. Seeing a few about just improving community resources and information as well, both online and hard copy. All right. Cool. All right. I might stop reading those out now. They've given us really great information and ideas to take away and filter through and look at a lot more closely over the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much for your comments and ideas and suggestions in those last two questions as well. To wrap up tonight, firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in and for your participation tonight. We've got two more polls, which are by means of evaluation for us. The first poll is a question around meeting your expectations. So in regards to providing you, our community, with an opportunity to share your ideas, to what extent did this session meet your expectations? So that poll's open now for you to pop your answer in. Open for another 30 seconds or so. Cool. A few more seconds for that one before we move on to our next evaluation question. Thank you. Let's have a look at that. Oh, thank you. So most of you found it did meet your expectations. So thank you. I'm glad we could deliver that for you. And yeah, thank you. That's good for us to know that we've got there with that one for you tonight. And the next poll question for you to answer is, how likely are you to attend our next session? So we're going to be delivering a third community forum in a few weeks' time, the date to be announced. So just wanting to know, based on your experience tonight and or at the last session you attended, if you're likely to attend our next session. And about 15 seconds left on that one. And that one is now closed. And Great. So we should all see you back here in just a few weeks when we set the date for our next session. So great. Thank you for that. And thanks for your ongoing support and interest in climate change, climate emergency, and building on sustainability in the City of Port Phillip. So thank you. To close tonight, I'd just like to also extend another thank you to our PCAN members, April, Jack and Rhonda, for lending their voices and expertise to our panel this evening. Thank you very much. And a big thank you also to the Sustainability Programs team for putting this event together. Lisa, Laura, Belinda, Brett, Juliet, Sylvia, Emma, Jess and Liam. It's been a big team effort on behalf of all those folks to pull this event together for you all this evening. So a big thanks to that team for all their work on this. There's a few things that we mentioned that we would follow up with tonight. So the team here will get onto that in the next week or two and get back to you with all of those things as well. And our third and final forum will focus on how council can support you to take actions that you've proposed here tonight to reduce the impacts of climate change. So we'll send information around soon about the next date for our third session. And finally, if you do have any other questions or comments or feedback, the Q&A will be open for a couple more minutes, so feel free to pop any kind of last minute comments, ideas, feedback, whatever you like into the Q&A. Otherwise, thank you all very much for your participation this evening, and we'll see you in a few weeks.